Yesterday evening, the ground beneath Naples, Italy shook harder than it has in 40 years. Not from an ordinary earthquake, but from one of the most dangerous supervolcanoes on the planet, slowly, steadily waking up beneath one of Europe's most densely populated regions. A magnitude 4.7 quake injured at least 21 people, shut down trains and the port, and sent thousands of families to sleep in their cars overnight. More than 500,000 people live directly inside this volcano's danger zone, and a brand new scientific study says the system could reach a critical breaking point sometime between 2030 and 2034. Today, we're breaking down exactly what's happening beneath Campi Flegrei, why the ground itself has been rising for 20 years, and what scientists are actually watching for next. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Had you heard of Campi Flegrei before today, or is this the first time? If you want to be the first to know every time something major happens geologically, subscribe to the channel right now. It is completely free. A thumbs up also helps enormously. Let's go for 5,000 likes on this one, so the algorithm actually shows it to the people who need to see it. Thank you. Now, let's get into it. What happened Friday night? At 7:46 p.m. local time on Friday, July 31st, 2026, a magnitude 4.7 earthquake struck the Campi Flegrei area west of Naples, Italy's third largest city. Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, INGV, confirmed it as the strongest tremor recorded in the area in 40 years of continuous instrumental monitoring, surpassing two previous magnitude 4.6 events recorded back in 2025. At least 21 people were injured, two of them seriously, and fire crews responded. To reports of falling plaster, cracked walls, and one section of building facade that collapsed onto parked cars in Pozzuoli, the town sitting closest to the caldera center. Dozens of aftershocks followed throughout the night, several exceeding magnitude 3.0, with the largest aftershock, a magnitude 3.8, striking at 10 p.m. in the Gulf of Pozzuoli. Train services and port operations in the area were suspended while safety teams inspected infrastructure, and Italy's Civil Protection Department opened an emergency crisis desk, remaining in direct contact with the Naples prefecture throughout the night. Many residents in Pozzuoli, Bagnoli, and western Naples chose to spend the night outdoors, or sleeping in their vehicles, describing the shaking as noticeably sharper than the magnitude 4.6 events they'd experienced the year before. What Campi Flegrei actually is unlike the cone-shaped volcanoes most people picture. Campi Flegrei, which translates to burning fields, isn't a single mountain at all. It's a vast volcanic caldera, a broad, mostly flat depression, roughly 12 to 13 kilometers across, formed thousands of years ago when a massive eruption emptied an underground magma chamber and caused the ground above it to collapse inward. Much of the caldera sits directly beneath and around the western edge of Naples, with a significant portion extending out under the Mediterranean Sea. Campi Flegrei last erupted in 1538, producing a smaller eruption that created an entirely new hill, Monte Nuovo, in the space of about a week. But the broader caldera system has produced far larger eruptions in its deeper history, including one of the most powerful volcanic events in Europe over the past 200,000 years. Today, more than 1.5 million people live in the greater Naples metropolitan area surrounding the caldera, and roughly 500,000 people live directly inside what Italian authorities designate the red zone, the 15 municipalities considered at highest risk if unrest were to escalate significantly. The 20-year story behind Friday's earthquake. To understand why this earthquake matters beyond its raw magnitude, you need to understand bradyseism, the specific geological process, driving essentially everything happening at Campi Flegrei, right? Now, bradyseism, from Greek words meaning slow movement, describes a cycle where the ground above a caldera slowly rises or falls over months to years, driven by pressure changes deep underground as magmatic gases and heated fluids move through the volcanic system. It's a well-documented, centuries-old phenomenon at this specific location. The Roman-era columns at Pozzuoli's ancient Serapeo temple famously show marine boring marks partway up their shafts, physical proof that this same stretch of ground has sunk below sea level and risen again multiple times throughout recorded history. The current uplift phase began in 2005 and has continued essentially without interruption since. According to INGV, the ground near Pozzuoli has risen by more than 140 centimeters, well over 4 feet, since that phase began. Seismicity has climbed steadily alongside that uplift, particularly since 2023, when the strongest earthquakes of that year, magnitude 4.2 and 4.0 events, struck within days of each other in September and October. In 2024, a magnitude 4.4 quake in May triggered an extraordinary mobilization of Italy's National Civil Protection Service, By 2025, two separate magnitude 4.6 events had each briefly claimed the title of strongest in 40 years. A record Friday's magnitude 4.7 quake has now broken again. That pattern, successive records being set and then broken again within just a couple of years, is precisely the detail Italian seismologists have been watching most closely. Why this isn't necessarily a sign of imminent eruption. Here's where the science gets genuinely nuanced, and it's important to get right rather than overstate. Experts have been consistent in stressing that this pattern of increasingly strong earthquakes fits within what INGV describes as the current evolution of volcanotectonic activity linked to the ongoing uplift, not necessarily a direct precursor to eruption. Unlike a classic magmatic system where rising magma physically forces its way toward the surface, generating an earthquake pattern that migrates measurably shallower over time, much of Campi Flegrei's unrest is understood to be driven primarily by hydrothermal processes, superheated water and gas moving through rock at relatively shallow depth, similar in underlying mechanism, though far larger in scale and population risk, to the seismic swarms we've discussed before at Tenerife's Mount Tide. That said, scientists studying Campi Flegrei have also been direct that this remains one of the most genuinely debated volcanic systems in the world, specifically because of that uncertainty. A 2026 study, led by researchers, including Christopher Kilburn, found that the crust beneath the caldera is becoming measurably weaker and more prone to rupturing as the accumulated uplift continues, concluding that this trend is making an eventual eruption more likely over time, even without predicting exactly when. Separately, another 2026 analysis identified what researchers called a potential critical mechanical threshold the system could reach sometime between 2030 and 2034, explicitly clarifying that reaching this threshold wouldn't necessarily mean an eruption, but could represent a regime change involving new ground fracturing or increased fumarole gas activity, a genuinely different kind of escalation than a full eruption, but one that would still represent a significant shift from the current pattern. Living with a supervolcano. For residents of Pozzuoli, Bagnoli, and the surrounding red zone communities, this uncertainty isn't an abstract scientific debate. It's a lived ongoing reality that's been building for 2 decades. Italy's government updated its mass evacuation contingency plans for the region in 2023 and 2024 specifically in response to the accelerating activity, and INGV maintains continuous, round-the-clock monitoring of seismicity, ground deformation, and volcanic gas emissions across the caldera. Volcano DB, resource tracking current conditions at the site, noted that as recently as early 2026, the pace of uplift was measured at roughly 10 millimeters per month, a gradual, closely tracked rate rather than a sudden, alarming spike, and one that has allowed both scientists and civil protection authorities time to plan and adjust rather than react to a sudden crisis. Official guidance throughout this entire multi-year period of unrest has remained consistent. Naples and Campi Flegrei remain safe to live in and visit under current conditions. Seismic events, while increasingly frequent, remain relatively small in the broader context of what this caldera is geologically capable of, and the risk, while genuinely real and worth taking seriously, is not considered imminent by the scientific bodies monitoring it most closely. What happens next? INGV continues assessing Friday's earthquake and its aftershock sequence in real time, with further updates expected once daylight inspection teams complete full structural surveys across the affected towns. Train services remained suspended as of the most recent reports, while safety teams finished their assessments of the rail infrastructure. Civil protection officials have reiterated their standard guidance for residents: stay alert, follow official instructions as they're issued, and wait for infrastructure safety checks to conclude before assuming normal operations will resume immediately. Longer-term INGVs. Continuous monitoring network will keep tracking whether this earthquake represents another data point within the expected ongoing bradyseism pattern, or an acceleration significant enough to shift the system's broader risk assessment. The exact distinction Italian volcanologists have spent the past 20 years trying to precisely define. Final thought. A supervolcano capable of reshaping European climate for years if it ever produced anything close to its largest historical eruptions is currently sitting beneath the homes of more than 500,000 people. And as of Friday night, it just delivered its strongest warning shot in 4 decades of careful, continuous scientific observation. That combination, genuine long-term risk, paired with genuinely uncertain timing, is precisely what makes Campi Flegrei one of the most closely studied volcanic systems on Earth. The Roman columns at Pozzuoli have quietly recorded this same cycle of rising and falling ground for 2,000 years without a repeat of the volcano's largest ancient eruptions. Whether the current uplift phase, now approaching its 20th consecutive, year eventually settles back down the way previous episodes have, or continues building toward the kind of critical threshold researchers are now actively modeling for the early 2030s, remains one of the genuinely open questions in volcanology today, and it's one the 500,000 residents living inside Campi Flegrei's red zone are watching unfold in real time, earthquake by earthquake. We will keep tracking this story and every other major seismic and volcanic event happening around the world right now. Subscribe so you don't miss it if this pattern continues to escalate. And leave that comment below. Had you heard of Campi Flegrei before today? 5,000 likes on this video. Let's go. See you in the next one.